In Season 34, Episode 6 of Survivor, after the Nuku tribe loses the immunity challenge, they go back to camp knowing they will have to go to Tribal Council to vote someone out. Jeff Varner believes he is likely the next to go, given he was the only person out of the loop at the previous Tribal Council with this tribe. Jeff asks if he could have time to talk to everybody before going to Tribal Council to make his case.
Can I have one-on-one time with everybody? I'll make my pitch and be at peace.
We see the majority of the tribe are contemplating voting out Jeff for Ozzy, given Ozzy is likely to be a big threat later in the game. When talking to Zeke, Jeff is informed he is likely going home and that the girls will lie to him to make him feel safe.
Andrea and Sarah are gonna make you feel safe.
Okay.
Jeff shares that Zeke told him this to Sarah, and she and Andrea are not happy about this.
Zeke sat me down and he said, "You're probably going home.
Yeah.
And the girls are gonna lie to you
What?
because they just don't want you to know."
Why would Zeke do that?
Because he's a coward.
That
And
pisses me off, Andrea.
No, it made me mad too.
The scene ends with Sarah sharing that she wonders if Zeke and Ozzy have a close secret alliance, and maybe Ozzy should get voted out as a result.
Do Zeke and Ozzy have something more going on that I don't know about? Maybe we need to get rid of Ozzy and keep Varner.
At Tribal Council, Jeff makes it clear that he knows he's going home, but tries with seemingly nothing to lose to convince anyone who will listen to vote for Ozzy, implying that Ozzy and Zeke are working closely, and that they are deceiving others in the game far more than people realize.
Vote for Ozzy. We'll take care of the whole situation. If you will vote, and you will vote, and you will vote, I'll hook us up.
Then, out of nowhere, Jeff says this.
Why haven't you told anyone you're transgender?
After a stunned moment of silence, everyone else jumps on Jeff to condemn him for revealing that Zeke is transgender to try to make him look deceptive.
So wrong for you to bring that up.
I'm not using that as anything negative.
the game. That's personal.
I'm not knocking him.
That's not deception. You
Jeff Probst, the host of the show, tries to understand just what the hell Varner was trying to prove. Varner claims that Zeke not revealing that he was transgender means he is very capable of deception.
You're saying by him not revealing it that he's capable of deception. That is a giant leap of logic.
Varner does quickly realize he made a mistake and tries to apologize, but it's not that simple to just do that.
I'm so sorry, Zeke. I support you.
Jeff, you
1000%.
can't unring the bell.
I'm not unringing the bell. I'm just apologizing, Jeff.
As the discussion around Varner's comment is discussed, it truly hits Varner what he has done once he has processed that Zeke was not out to the rest of the world that he was transgender, but now he will be. And Varner breaks down in tears, realizing what he's really done.
Varner, is it starting to hit you, the gravity, that you didn't just tell 6 people? You told millions of people.
See, Jeff assumed that because Zeke was just on the previous season of Survivor, which hadn't aired yet, then surely he must be out as transgender to the world, and that he was just keeping the secret from the players in the game, when really Zeke hadn't revealed it yet because...
And one of the reasons why I didn't want to lead with that is I didn't want to be like the trans Survivor player. I wanted to be Zeke the Survivor player.
Now, you might be thinking, should the network be to blame for outing Zeke since they still chose to air the episode? But it's worth mentioning that Zeke gave the network permission to air this Tribal Council and was in contact with the show to discuss how this episode would be portrayed. Zeke never tried to talk the show out of airing this episode. It was always a matter of how they get it right. After giving Zeke the time he needed to cool down, Probst gives Zeke the chance to share why it's difficult for him to tell people he's transgender, as well as how his experience on Survivor has helped him become a better person.
You know, there are people who know, but then I sort of got to a point where I stopped telling people, because when people know that about you, that's sort of who you are. It sort of overwhelms everything else that they know about you.
You're no longer Zeke.
Right. You're the trans person. I knew someone might pick up on it or it might be revealed. So like, I am prepared to talk about it, to have it be part of my Survivor experience. If metamorphosis is the word of the episode, I feel like I've seen such a metamorphosis of myself over the past, I think today is day 52 that I've played Survivor. I am a changed, stronger, better man today than I was then.
He tells Varner he's fine. Other people in the game share their thoughts on their feelings about Varner's actions and how they've grown to love and respect Zeke.
I'm so glad that I got to know you for Zeke and not, what you were afraid of us knowing you as. And I'll never look at you that way.
Thank you.
Zeke shares that maybe the events of this tribal council will lead to a greater good. Maybe someone out there who's a Survivor fan will take some form of inspiration from Zeke's journey.
And so maybe this will lead to a greater good.
Eventually, the tribal council ends, with Probst implying there's no need to vote, and Varner gives Zeke a hug, apologizes, gets his torch snuffed, and the episode ends on a Nuku tribe leaving tribal council. Unfortunately, in the years that followed this episode airing, Jeff Varner has sadly changed his perspective on transgender rights, implying the community is some sort of cult, condemning preferred pronouns, and believes he was more of a victim in the situation on Survivor than Zeke was, because there was a lot that happened in this tribal council that didn't make air, that he believes would have made him look less horrible for his actions. Such as Probst saying that he knows Varner doesn't have a hateful bone in his body, that everyone except for Sarah hugged Varner before he left, not just Zeke, and that Zeke apparently said, "No one is deceiving anyone," which was what actually prompted Varner to reveal that Zeke was transgender, rather than him planning to do so ahead of time like some viewers may have thought. I don't know how any of those things being shown would have made Varner look any less guilty for his actions or got him any less hate online, but all that aside, this episode helped me understand the importance of respecting transgender people and that it should be up to them, and only them, to decide when to come out, as it is a deeply personal part of who they are, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's something I've never forgotten. In Season 17, Episode 13 of Family Guy, Peter drinks several beers too fast at a baseball game and goes to use the bathroom, only to find the line to the men's room is far too long for him to wait. Urgent to pee, Peter uses a transgender bathroom without understanding what that exactly is. Peter is later shown on the Jumbotron using the transgender bathroom and is now assumed by those who saw it to be transgender.
You use the transgender bathroom, so now everyone thinks you're transgender.
The next day at work, Peter is told that he can have employee benefits now that his management believes Peter to be transgender, even though he's not.
Peter, before you say anything that might clear all this up, let me tell you about our stellar transgender employee benefit package.
Benefits? I'm trans listening.
And so, Peter does not deny that he is trans to his work colleagues. Peter's family condemns him for pretending to be transgender, but quickly realize it's pointless to try to argue about it as they're not going to change his mind. Peter's friends don't agree with what he's doing either, but they're unable to change his mind as well.
Sorry, Peter, I don't see you getting away with this one.
Despite that, Peter embraces trying to be a woman solely for the perks of being one by getting a makeover, wearing women's clothes, and saying things to his male friends that he knows would anger them, knowing that if he identifies as a woman, then they won't punch him out of anger. Peter also tries to use this opportunity to bond with his female colleagues and lean dance at a karaoke bar, but while he's messing around, he hits his head on a low ceiling fan, sending him into a coma. Peter obviously survives, but when he wakes up, he discovers that during his coma, his bosses paid for him to have sexual reassignment surgery, and that he got that while he was in his coma. Peter is told that he is now a woman.
Congratulations, Peter. You're officially a woman.
Peter is now upset with himself for this whole situation going as far as it did, and now believes he has to live with the consequences of that because, as we later find out, he can't just afford the surgery to transition back. Peter tries to embrace being a woman but loses favor from his friends. Out of shame, Peter goes to an LGBT bar where he runs into Ida, Quagmire's father, who has been previously established as a transgender character on the show. Ida recognizes Peter and invites him to sit with her. Ida tells Peter that she's heard about what's been going on and says everything will be okay. Ida then opens up to Peter about her life prior to coming out as transgender and having her transition. Ida shares that her struggles with her gender identity began as early as when she was a child.
And from the age of 8, I was mercilessly teased for being different and dressing funny. Then, at the age of 14, I had an epiphany. It was so clear. I was a girl trapped in a boy's body.
After realizing she was a girl trapped in a boy's body, she took 47 years to own who she is, which came with a mountain of challenges.
In those 47 years, I became an expert at hiding my secret. I became a war hero and raised a family. But I was dying inside. And the deeper I buried it, the more unhappy I became. And eventually, I even thought of ending my own life. But I couldn't do that to Glenn.
Upon hearing that Ida was burying who she was for so long to the point where she eventually thought about suicide, makes Peter become emotional, as he never understood just what obstacles she or other transgender people have gone through.
And my story, to one degree or another, is every transgender person's story. And all those stories are the price of admission to finally feeling at peace with who you are. A price you never paid.
Peter certainly hasn't paid the price that transgender people have done to be at peace with themselves, as he hasn't been dealing with a gender identity crisis throughout his life. He only wanted to be a woman to enjoy the perks of being one, and the struggles Peter has suffered throughout the episode, possibly aside from nearly getting himself killed on a ceiling fan, pale in comparison to the lifelong, isolating, soul-crushing struggles that many transgender people have dealt with in the real world. Peter concludes that
I deserve what happened to me.
Ida tells Peter that now that he's taken a journey, he can come out of it a better man, and helps Peter gets the surgery to go back to being a man again. This episode has average comedic jokes in it, but this episode shows how transgender rights, as well as the struggles transgender people go through, are not to be taken for granted or used for someone else's benefits. Peter didn't understand that he was doing exactly that until Ida opened up to him about what she's been through her whole life. Ida's story may be fictional, but it does shed a light on what many transgender people in the world have to go through, such as struggling with identity crisis as early as childhood, juggling if you should own up to who you are or if you should keep your mouth shut, and how all of that and likely more have led many transgender people to deal with deep trauma and consider suicide. It's something I've never forgotten. The World Sports Stacking Association made a ruling about transgender competitors back in May. The organization overlooks the rules, records, and competitions for sports stacking, a sport where you stack up to 12 specially designed cups in predetermined sequences as fast as possible. For many years, sports stacking has helped me with self-confidence, meeting people in competitions across North America, and dealing with the grief of losing my father at a young age. That said, I was incredibly disappointed when I saw that the WSSA made a ruling that transgender stackers must register according to their birth gender for competitions. This means transgender male stackers must compete in female divisions, and transgender female stackers must compete in the male divisions. I was very surprised to read this, so let's explore why they would do this. Back in 2012, the WSSA separated male and female divisions because male stackers were predominantly faster in competitions than female stackers. And so, by separating the divisions, which many sports already do, this would allow girls to stand out more in competitions and when setting female records. I always thought this was a good thing, and I still think it is. But the WSSA believes that due to the statistics of how well male stackers perform compared to women, that transgender female stackers would have an unfair advantage competing in the female divisions. There is so much nonsense behind this ruling, you may be surprised by just how much there is. This ruling puts transgender people in a position where they have to be out as trans in order to comply with the rules. This means when you're competing at a finals table, you must clarify to the judge that you are transgender if they ask why you're not in the division they think you should be in. Also, you must be stacking at the practice table behind the finals table for your division as you wait your turn. So, if a transgender is competing in the 17 to 18-year-old male division, because they have to, other stackers may say, I think you're at the wrong table, your division is over there. And that trans person must clarify that they are trans not because they want to, but because they had to. We should not be putting transgender people in a position where they must come out in order to comply with the rules. Not for this. On one hand, allowing transgender people to compete under the gender they identify as could run the risk of having a transgender person standing on a first-place podium, which could potentially look awkward to some people who can tell the winner is transgender just by looking at them. On the other hand, forcing transgender people to compete under their birth gender runs the risk of a transgender person, who may not be obviously transgender, standing on a first-place podium amongst competitors who are clearly a different gender from them, which would look very very awkward. One risk is discriminatory against transgender people, and the other is not. Varner tried to take advantage of Zeke being transgender to stay in the game. Peter tried to take advantage of trying to be transgender to enjoy the benefits of being a woman. The WSSA thinks that, intended or not, transgender female stackers are taking advantage of being transgender to win competitions and set records. I later found out this ruling was made because a transgender person, whose name I will leave anonymous for reasons I'll get to later, reached out to a WSSA official to ask if she could register under the female division for a sports stacking tournament because she identified as female. She was told yes, but was later called by the president of Speed Stacks to be told she actually could not register as female, but she is free to compete as long as she registers under the male division. She was also told an article would be made clarifying this for all future trans stackers. So to clarify, none of this was prompted by transgender people flooding the competitions, winning national championships, or setting world records. This ruling, which applies to all WSSA competitions worldwide, was all prompted because one transgender person asked permission to register under the gender they identify as at a tournament that only 17 people competed in. That's absolutely pathetic. But Henry, if they allowed one transgender stacker to compete under the gender they identify as, they have to allow all transgender stackers to do that. Yeah, I agree, and I would have preferred that. But the point is, it did not take very much for the WSSA to make this decision. I almost wonder if this would have been prompted by someone asking about this topic in the Sports Stacking Facebook group out of curiosity. And to any maniac watching who thinks that trans men will never be men, or trans women will never be women, or that transgenderism should be eradicated, you disagreed with this video before you clicked on it. So go away. In the article announcing this ruling, it says the WSSA will still welcome all stackers who want to be a part of the sport, but let me ask you this. Have you ever been invited to have dinner with the family of your friend, but were warned you had to share some of your deepest, darkest secrets with everyone at the table so you could dine on the same food?
Okay, you know what? Elephant in the room. I'll say it. So, Ida, you miss your penis?
Peter! Thank you for asking it.
Would you still feel very welcome inside that house?
Jeez.
I didn't think so. The article also claims that this decision is in no way a challenge to anyone's identity. I don't know how you people can claim this after everything we have just gone over. It's as if they are saying, it's okay that you're trans, you just have to declare it and compete as though you're not trans, even if you're not comfortable with that. For crying out loud. Many months ago, I took it upon myself to email the president of SpeedStacks to explain the problems in this ruling, how nobody is going to pretend to change their gender to win a competition, how we should not put transgender people in a position where they need to be out in order to compete fairly, and that I would not compete in WSSA competitions as long as this ruling was in play. I'm not respecting the WSSA any more than they are respecting transgender rights. I got an email back the next day from him where he explained that no, there is no concern about stackers lying about their gender to cheat in competitions, but rather this decision came down to the math, that male stackers are just too fast compared to female stackers, as if that outweighs any discrimination this ruling has in it. I was also assured that the transgender stacker who was denied competing under the female division could still physically compete under the female age division as long as her results and any record she sets were tabulated under the basis of her birth gender, and that physically competing under the gender you identify as will be offered to all transgender stackers. Oh, look at that, guys. Everything's okay, except it's not. First of all, if you're willing to offer that, why didn't you make that clear in the article announcing this ruling, or in the sports stacking rulebook, or under the registration pages of all sanctioned WSSA tournaments? Secondly, you're still putting transgender people in a position where they may not feel comfortable bragging about setting state, national, or world records because the records page shows individual records based on gender, and world records are posted on the WSSA YouTube page where the first word of the title of the video is the stacker's gender. How did you think this through? Did you just look at these numbers and thought, well, we have no choice? You claim that you did consider the emotional side of this, but I just don't believe that because of how quickly this decision was made. It's not like this is the first time you guys have made a decision about this sport so quickly without considering the emotional repercussions. Remember when the WSSA allowed double down stacking and said we didn't have to turn and tap the cups on the 110-1 down stack? Remember when speed stacks made a timer that could time the thousandths of a second to provide more accuracy in times? That was all great because it benefited everybody stacking and judging records. Now, remember when Trey was told he couldn't use his logoless cups at the prelims table at the 2017 World Championships in Taiwan because Larry thought he could tell they were intentionally washed off, despite logoless cups being allowed at the time, despite the fact that Trey's family traveled from Texas to Taiwan so he could compete, despite dozens if not hundreds of stackers around him also using logoless cups that I'm willing to believe a lot of them washed off. And then the WSSA tried to fix this problem by saying, sorry, we'll be fair and forbid all stackers from using logoless cups now. And then we all got mad and demanded that the WSSA not do this, and they delayed this until Pro Series 2X came out and everyone got them. Remember when the Gen 5 timer was announced because the WSSA gave up trying to review records where stackers were holding cups or wrist stopping, and the Gen 5 timer made it harder to get faster times because of how your hands had to be placed on the timer? The WSSA was like, don't worry, because of how this timer makes stackers slower, we are resetting all the records. Every state, national, and world record that many stackers worked for years to get was thrown away so the WSSA could hit a reset button and start from scratch. Oh, and remember when Haley Berry came out about how at the 2018 World Championships, when she was 16, a 22-year-old stacker kissed her on the cheek without her consent, and then no punishment was given because apparently the WSSA thought an inappropriate kiss on the cheek was not sexual harassment? How do you do all of this and claim you care so much about your competitors? Let me take a moment to address why I didn't name the transgender stacker who asked to compete under the gender she identified as. Sometime after this ruling was publicly announced, the stacker who was transgender, who did make a video talking about her phone call with the president of SpeedStacks, which is how I learned her side of the story, deleted her channel. I have, however, found 2 videos which touch on some bullying she experienced in the community. Looking at you, Facebook groups. I can't help but think that this stacker faced so much toxicity from the stacking community on top of her treatment from the WSSA, and that just made her want to erase any trace of her stacking from the internet altogether. Part of what drew me to sports stacking was how you didn't have to be the fastest runner or the strongest person to be good. It was also a community of people from different realms of life that welcomed anyone, and that anyone could feel like they belonged. But that doesn't feel like the case anymore. And I'm not saying you shouldn't compete in WSSA tournaments anymore. Compete all you want in them. Just be aware of what the WSSA has done. Sports stacking may not be dead, but it is not what it once was. What it once was is dead.